What's the Church of Scientology so afraid of?
This is SPTV.
In April 2016, Ron Miscavige, the father of Scientology's notorious leader David Miscavige, was granted an exclusive interview on the ABC News show 2020.
A father's story.
The interview was scheduled to be aired a few weeks prior to the release of Ron's book, Ruthless, Scientology, My Son David Miscavige, and Me. The producers of ABC 2020 offered Miscavige an opportunity to respond to the upcoming episode. Miscavige's response, as usual, was to call out his favorite proxy warriors.
Now fly! Fly!
I was one of those flying monkeys. I'm making this video to hold myself accountable for the statements I made, impugning Ron's character, and to put those on notice who were also involved in the production of the interviews. I participated in this interview strictly for the purpose of providing 2020 with a response from the church. Later, and without my knowledge or consent, my interview was posted on the church-owned website, ronmiscavigebook.com. I don't say that as an excuse, but to put the church on notice for having illegally used my likeness without my permission. When considering doing this reaction video, at first I thought maybe I shouldn't be playing it again, only because the stuff I said against Ron is just so toxic and such lies. But I think it's important to get it out there so that nobody thinks that I am hiding anything. I just want to be completely transparent. So I'm playing the whole thing, and I'll just pause it and react as needed. So here goes. My name's Mitch Brisker, and I'm the senior director. I'm also like a creative executive with Golden Era Productions. I've been involved with Gold since 1990. Okay, so right off the bat, I have to say, if I put on like a fatigues and didn't shave for a couple of days, I would look like a North Korean prisoner of war. I mean, I look so freaked out there. When I look at it now, I can't even believe it. Like, I don't know what the heck was going on, but I was like really afraid of something. The next, you get to see me squirm in my chair while I create this completely fictitious narrative about how David Miscavige was some kind of a prodigy who grew up and was destined to take over the church and was given the reins by the church's leader. And it is complete bullshit. Half of it I made up, half of it was just this weird mythology that I was fed, and all of it I found out later was just a complete and utter lie. I have to say this whole story is really the story of a young man who's 16 years old, discovers something he wants to do for the rest of his life and chooses a life of service, religious service to humanity, and joins a Sea organization and a religious order, and is almost like a prodigy in terms of being an auditor, a professional practitioner of Scientology, and then ultimately works closely with the founder of the religion, and then is chosen by him personally as the individual who's then going to be the leader, and he's entrusted with the materials to make sure that they're pure, to oversee that. And then at some point, his father enters back into the picture, and here's an unemployable musician with medical problems and legal problems and financial problems, and he takes him in and he shows him a kind of a grace and a kind of nobility that is far beyond what you would expect anyone to show anyone, not even a father and a son. And then, regardless of that individual's 2 decades of saying, yeah, I want to do this and I want to improve and I want to get better, it turns around and just stabs him in his back, and in the worst kind of treachery. Wow, I need to take a breath there. I can't even. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I had this idea. I was going to sort of frame this story as some kind of a Greek tragedy about this father that stabs his son in the back, and it's just such bullshit. I mean, wow. Okay, well, my first encounter with Ron was witnessing him hitting on my girlfriend in front of me. She met him at a local Scientology event, and he asked her for her contact information under the context of inviting her to Gold to act in a film. She was an actress.
And at first this seemed innocent enough. And I came home one day, she's on the phone, and I'm like, who's that? She said, oh, it's Ron Miscavige, right? And it was kind of strange because I figured, hey, maybe somebody from Gold would call, not the trumpet player, right? And then he would call like daily, incessantly. He'd keep hitting on her and trying to kind of figure out a way that he could connect up with her. And it was just really awkward. I mean, we knew who his son was. And so the whole thing was really strange, to say the least.
There is some truth to this story. It really did happen. My girlfriend at the time had met Ron at some local event at Celebrity Center or something, and he was pursuing her pretty vigorously, and it was a little awkward because he's, quite a bit older than her, about 33 years. And, but, she said, oh, he promised they'd teach me to sing and I could act in films. And putting that aside, the thing that I really have to stress here is that it's so difficult for someone in the Sea Org, especially for a staff member at Gold, to ever find a partner. The dating pool is so small. I mean, it's got to be, there were maybe 400 people there, but by the time you boil it all down, the dating pool for any individual has got to be less than 100. And so this creates a kind of a nervous hysteria, kind of a desperation to find, a partner. I could really understand Ron's position that he was put in, because I saw a lot of other people put in that position. They're forbidden from dating. They can't have anything to do with the opposite sex unless they're actually married. So, it's like you get things like that when you put people in a situation like that. And I think that that's more the important story to stress. Was I right to impugn him on this? Was I right to call him out on this? Was I right to exaggerate it and make such a big deal out of it? Absolutely not.
I came to Gold in 1990, directing the Ella Ridge technical training films. And the scoring department is run by the Golden Era musicians, a really talented bunch of guys. One of them, Ron Miscavige, trumpet player, was assigned to score a title sequence for me. Never got it right. I gave him direction. And finally, I gave him a piece of direction. He took it back, and with somebody else's help, he scored it. And then every time I would work with him, he would come back to me and say, now, remember on that film you gave me that piece of direction? What's it going to be on this film? And I'm like, you got to be kidding. You mean you tortured me into giving you a piece of direction, and now you just want me to do that again?
Oh my God, the horror. He tortured me because I wouldn't give him direction, and I was the director. I can't believe I'm making such a big deal out of this. Let me just back up. I said the musicians of Gold were really talented. Yes and no. I mean, they were all competent musicians. And seriously, I mean, they all, if they showed up at your wedding or your bar mitzvah or whatever, you would be happy with their ability to play. Or if you heard them in a lounge in Vegas, you'd be very happy. A couple of them were very talented. Peter Schless, great pianist, keyboardist, played with some really notable rock bands. They were all competent musicians. But here's my point. One of the tragic things that the Sea Org does to its members is that it insists that a Sea Org member perform any task that's asked of them, and to do so with the same competency of any professional skilled in that task. So all of the musicians at Gold are required to compose for film, and that's a very specialized skill. And the thing that I'm not telling you in this interview is that my heart is breaking for Ron, because he's being put in this position where he has to do something that he has no natural competency to do. He was a good trumpet player. He was an excellent band leader. He could have worked any number of jobs as a musician and had, but scoring for film, this is a really specialized thing.
So then after that, I just kind of avoided him, because he didn't, it wasn't a collaborative thing. Like, every key terminal, every key member of a filmmaking team contributes something. They bring what they have to the table, and Ron just never brought anything.
Okay, so there you go. There's my whole spiel about how Ron never brought anything. But the real, again, I'm just going to say it, the real problem here is the way the Sea Org forces its members to perform tasks that they're not suited for.
I found him to be talentless, and I avoided him. Most of our encounters after the initial one where he just completely flopped on something we were working on and had to be redone. I just avoided him. And so we would have cordial social discourses about weight training because he knew I had once worked out with a guy that he admired in the muscle building area. And he would just constantly harangue me about information about my encounter with this person. So it was pretty much, it seemed like he was much more interested in exercise equipment than he was in the trumpet.
Yeah, that would be the Iron Guru, Vince Gironda. He passed away some years ago, but I was living in Studio City at the time, about a mile away from this little gym, and I stopped in there one day, not knowing anything about it. I just wanted a place to get in shape. And this guy had like trained Schwarzenegger and Frank Zane, and he was really a noted guy. Ron was really obsessed with Vince Gironda and with his muscle building techniques. Just as an aside, it was one of the parts of my social life that completely disappeared when I went to work for Gold. But Ron was really obsessed with Vince Gironda, and so. But you want to know who was really obsessed with fitness? His son, David. And I'll tell you, I spoke a lot more about fitness and weight training with David than I ever did with Ron. So this, again, is just really a special statement that I regret having ever made.
When I was invited to Gold back in 1990, 89, 90, I was invited to come up potentially direct a film. One of the, what we call the Elleridge technical training films, which they're films that show people how to do Scientology, how to audit, and so forth. I was familiar with these as studying Scientology as a student, but then I came up and I had an opportunity to actually direct these films, scripted by L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh yeah, I was very familiar with these. These had to be the worst, poorest quality films I'd ever seen. I mean, the people that made these, 16-year-old David Miscavige was on camera, and there was just a bunch of, LRH messengers and so forth that had no idea how to make a film. One of the reasons I wanted to go up there is because these films are so just embarrassingly bad.
Then I came to Gold. That was like a big honor for Scientologists. I mean, it's a very special place for Scientologists. That was like a huge honor.
Yeah, Gold is a special place, all right. You get your own golden handcuffs, and you get to live in a hermetically sealed bubble behind a guarded gate. At least that was my experience.
Plus, to hold in my hand these scripts, these documents that Elleridge wrote, they're part of our scriptures. Like, we don't call them that. We call them technology because they're spiritual technology. But to a religion, somebody else of another belief, that forms the core of it.
So yeah, all of a sudden we became parishioners, and it was everything became religious, and the books and lectures and films were scriptures, and we started putting up this public relations front about that our religiosity deserved the same respect and protection of any religion on earth. And by the time Scientology Media Productions opened, I remember at the opening, one of the things that really turned me away from Scientology was listening to Miscavige up on the podium announce that Scientology is the coolest religion on earth. And I was just like, I'm fucking done with this nonsense.
So David Miscavige's, his job, he has many jobs, as I found out.
Punching people in the face, changing the work of L. Ron Hubbard, repurposing it for power, personal gain, running an authoritarian regime into the ground. He's got a bunch of jobs, not to mention the pleasure he seems to derive from inflicting pain on his imagined enemies.
And I've seen it evolve since then into these unbelievable facilities, the churches that fulfill the kind of the requirements, specifications as laid out by the founder of the religion in ways you could not imagine. And it all happened because of the leadership of this one person who was able to take people's enthusiasm and their determinism, and their belief, and lead them in the truest sense of the word. Lead means to lead, that needs to go first.
Wow, I'm completely dumbfounded how we ever thought that what I was saying here was somehow going to convince the producers at ABC 2020 that Ron was lying and that somehow we were the good guys. I mean, I completely am baffled. You know, maybe it's because I'm standing on a soapbox and I'm like pontificating about the importance of what I do as a creator of religious material, quote unquote, and somehow this is supposed to make us unassailable, like there's no way we could be anything but the good guys. It is bullshit. I am so embarrassed by this. I can't even tell you, so please, no comments about how I embarrass myself because I'm fully aware of it.
That's my role, and that was laid down by L. Ron Hubbard. And he defined the film director, and that person had a lot of freedom. He, by policy, defined the film director as as the French said, the auteur, which means the author of the film. So Mr. Miscavige gave me all of the freedom that afforded in that I was the author of the film, and I would propose it to him, my proposal, and he would check it against the tenets of the religion and the technical aspects of the religion, and he'd give me a thumbs up. And I'll tell you, he never gave me a thumbs down.
Hubbard was really big on this auteur theory, which was a French film theory, which made the director, the auteur means author, the author of the film. Somebody else may write the script, but the director writes the film from the script onto screen, right? And so there's all this stuff that he wrote about all the freedom that the director has. But then at the same time, especially working under David Miscavige, you are micromanaged. So whatever it is you have the freedom to do is then adjudicated on and judged on. And I'm telling you, that is like poison to your creative spirit. Eventually, I just became so beaten down by having the freedom to do what somebody else wanted me to do that I couldn't take it anymore. And I didn't even realize the degree of abuse that was. It's not physical, but it's really like moral and spiritual abuse.
Well, the thing that really, the hallmark of that relationship, I would call it a collaboration, right? It's, film is a collaborative art form, and working with him was like having this person. It was more like I did these films with him. I mean, they were my films. I directed them. Many of them were from scripts written by L. Ron Hubbard, which was truly a joy. His job was to see that the message was correct, that the films were fulfilling their technical religious mission in training auditors. But he would work with me, like collaborate with me, like not telling me what to do artistically, but to
make sure that everything that I did was exactly the way he wanted it. And I can't tell you, there were so many times when he said, he wanted something done differently, and I would do it, and I would feel totally compromised because I had just taken my own work and not made it better. In some cases made it worse, but not made it better, just made it different. Can you imagine if somebody had said to you about something you created, like, I just want it different, and so you made it different, and it was never the way you intended it to be to begin with?
It's kind of hard to explain in a way, but it really is a unique and wonderful kind of relationship that I think few people are going to experience working with that great of a person.
Yeesh, I cannot believe I was so brainwashed I actually said that.
That can actually give you leadership with collaboration. Like you're going to, he rolls up his sleeves with you and he helps you, and together you get this thing done. You from your part and he from his part. The mind-boggling thing is that he's done that with so many people, and it's just like, how often do you get to work with somebody like that?
Yeah, it's not often you get to work with somebody who's locking people up and beating the shit out of them.
And I found out that what he was doing with me, he was taking the same care with all these other people and projects all over the world. And I thought, wow, you can only be inspired to want to work for an individual like that because you don't get a lot of chances to work for an individual like that. And nonetheless, that you share that belief system and you have an ability, you have the opportunity to participate in that.
So, yeah, if you were ever curious, that's what it looks like when you're completely brainwashed and you're inside a bubble and you're looking out through a totally distorted lens.
That's why I say, like, wow, I had a front seat to history. It's like not an exaggeration. And I got to like kind of participate in it and actually witness it happening.
Let's just hope that that history includes seeing David Miscavige and the Church of Scientology held accountable for their crimes.
The more we produced, the more we got. The more productive we were, we would expand in proportion to the production.
The more we produced, the more we got. Yeah, like rats running on a wheel that like dispensed cocaine, the faster you ran. I mean, this is just like the pain punishment, syndrome at its best. Because the thing that I'm not mentioning is, yeah, sure, there was the reward of having more when you produce, but there was also the punishment that I saw meted out to the staff up there when they didn't produce as they were arbitrarily demanded was just sickening.
And eventually we ended up in this studio that we're sitting in right now, this 80,000 square foot studio. It's just an unbelievable facility. It's maybe in the top 3% of studios in Southern California, which is, the motion picture capital of the world. So that's saying something.
It's actually saying nothing because it's just not true that it's in the top 3%.
And Gold is a very well organized. I mean, this place, it runs like clockwork. I mean, it's extremely well organized.
Well, Mussolini got the trains to run on time in Italy. I mean, being on time, running like clockwork, these are usually the hallmarks of an authoritarian regime. I mean, not that you have to be authoritarian in order to, run things on time and be efficient, but that is just no earmark of an organization that's not a cult.
You have a lot of dedicated, energized people. They have the very best equipment. And this deadline thing is like, yeah, you're going to have deadlines. If you don't want to have deadlines, go get a 9-to-5 job. It's like, it's simple. It's like everybody knows that. We used to joke about it on commercials. Like there's just some people, they're never going to make it into the higher echelons of creative, like positions, and they're not going to be creative directors or film directors or writers. They're not, because they just want to go home. They don't like deadlines. No, I don't want to do that. They're just, it's fine. The world has many different echelons of people. And when some of those, lower echelons, like a trumpet player who wants to clock in and clock out, it's like they're not the ones that are going to define what the world of a deadline is, because there's a lot of us that kind of live for a deadline because that's where the real satisfaction is of getting something done.
Wow. That is the most elitist, narcissistic rant I think I've ever come up with.
They don't like jumping out of airplanes either with a parachute because they think, the ground rushing up, that's just like an unreal deadline.
Okay, so I'm going to give myself a completely stupid metaphor, analogy award for that one, jumping out of airplanes, because that's just like whatever.
But, some people love that. They pull the chute, they make a beautiful landing, everybody applauds,
So I think my point is, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how good you look. It's like as long as you stick the landing and get some applause, it really doesn't matter what you did. I'm not sure about that. But I got to tell you, making this analogy about people working hard and being willing to work hard for rewards, it's such a misplaced comparison, because there's no reward for these people. Yes, they work hard for a deadline, but the reward is an absence of pain. It's not an abundance of pleasure like the people that I'm referring to who want to work hard and they want to seek those rewards. They truly do get rewarded, but the people at Gold, it's just like the reward is you don't get punished. The reward is maybe you get a day off. I'm just ashamed of myself for making that comparison, because it's just a completely bankrupt idea in this context.
I've worked with these guys since 1990, and I know what kind of a standard of living they are afforded. And you can't talk about a person's income without talking about their standard of living, and they have a very high standard of living. Continued education.
Yeah, continued education if the thing that you're studying is something they want you to study.
Egyptian cotton sheets.
Yeah, the best Egyptian cotton sheets you could buy at Costco, like big deal.
high-speed Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi up there, it's relatively high speed, but it's so locked down. There's so many filters on it. Everything you search for is recorded and studied in a log, and everything meaningful that can help you learn anything about culture and society is completely filtered out. They have just the most severest filters on their internet.
Time off to handle personal things.
I rarely saw people get time off to handle personal things. At Gold in the Sea Org, there's no such thing as a personal thing. So how could you get time off to handle it?
The potential to earn production bonuses.
Okay, that's a promise to earn production bonuses. I was there for 28 years. I never saw anybody I worked with in Gold receive a production bonus.
The healthiest meals that are prepared and ready for them so they don't have to worry about those things.
Okay, so the meals are decent. They have a pretty good industrial kitchen. You're not going to starve to death up there. That's a fact.
They receive an allowance like church workers do.
Yeah, they do. They receive a stipend, whatever it is, between $40, $50 a week. And somehow, I guess because I said like church workers do, I guess it's supposed to justify it, but they didn't always get paid, and they never got paid enough to save anything for the future. I mean, sure, they didn't have many expenses, but the degree to which these guys work, I mean, you talk about wage slavery, these guys are beyond wage slaves.
And then on top of that, they also have the standard of living, which you would have to earn a substantial income to afford that standard of living.
Yeah, and if they were actually paid for the work that they do, they would have a very decent income.
So this pay thing is just like a joke.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly call it a joke. I would say more like I was defending the indefensible here. It is a fact that the standard of living is decent there, especially compared with what would consider the poverty level, but it's really the quality of life that suffers. The Sea Org members in general, and especially at Gold, they just have an abysmal quality of life. And they don't even know it because they're so in this mission to save the world. They so believe that their suffering is for a good purpose that it's just so sad. So that's basically the interview. And like I said, this interview was taken and used on the hate site, ronmiscavigebook.com. It was done so without my knowledge. And again, I don't offer that as an excuse, but it's just to let the church know that just to put them on notice that they used that illegally without my consent. I never signed a release. I did it for one purpose. Perhaps the most amazing part of Miscavige's response to 2020 was he ordered their Italian master baking chef to prepare a lovely basket of baked goods to send to the producers. I mean, he curated this basket himself, and he was convinced that once the producers of ABC 2020 got a load of the quality of the baked goods that are provided to the staff at Gold, they would come to realize that there's no way Ron Miscavige could have possibly been mistreated. I know that sounds bizarre, but really it's no more bizarre than that baker making a cake for Tom and Katie's wedding and then flying it to Italy. Like what? You can't get a wedding cake in Italy? So in the final analysis, none of the material we produced was ever used on air in the ABC 2020 episode, except for a few statements by Miscavige mouthpiece and hired consigliere Monique Muffins Yingling, who showed up at the ABC studios in New York with this wonderful basket of cakes and so forth, which is how she got the nickname Monique Muffins Yingling. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. If anybody would like, I'm thinking about maybe doing one of those, like an Ask Me Anything episode, like a live thing. If you guys may have questions about these things or maybe other things I was involved in. I was never really involved in the hate sites or any of the kind of those kinds of activities that the church is famous for. I mean, one thing you need to understand is Scientologists, they're not a monolith. I was not the only one that was politically progressive, pro-gay rights, and thought some of these tactics they did were horrible, because we actually differentiated between Scientology, the philosophy, the idea, and Scientology, the organization, though eventually I and many others who left came to realize that the bigotry and the hatred and the sort of tactics that deny people their rights, that outcome, those are baked into the philosophy itself. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell to find out about new content and when my book is coming out, and be well. Take care of each other.